once upon a time, there were the first PISA results coming out, as you all know, talking about emotions in international learning assessment studies. We could argue an almost hysterical debate started in Germany when these first results came out, because the country which has long prided itself with contributions to Western science and philosophy now was confronted with results in PISA which showed that it's somewhere in the middle. So mediocrity. So in essence, what happens afterwards? PISA unleashed a comprehensive reform initiative in and of the German education system, and it's still going on today. Now, compared to the 15 German Bundesländer, one country stood out, namely Bremen, the Bundesland I live in. Bremen scored particularly bad in PISA, in the PISA E study comparing the German Bundesländer with each other, and became last out of all the Bundesländer compared. Reasons are manifold. So Bremen is one of the poorest Bundesländer. It's a city-state, so that means a lot of families live in the city-state, which receive social benefits, and also a high percentage of children live in Bremen with a migration background, and so on. I mean, we cannot talk about the meaning of the PISA ranking and the data and so forth, but that's not my point here. What I want to emphasize is that according to the PISA data, within Germany, Bremen had the greatest need for reforms. Of course, there were a couple of ad hoc measures taken, but there was also an encompassing school reform. So in 2009, the traditional tripart school system in Germany, this highly selective type of school system, was given up in favor of a bipart system. So now we have in Bremen a so-called Oberschule and the traditional Gymnasium. The clue here was that in both types, it leads to a child to finish school with Abitur, so the A levels, which are the entrance card for university. The difference is, Gymnasium means you do it in 12 years, Oberschule means you do it in 13 years. In a study conducted earlier this year, people of Bremen were the most satisfied with this school system within Germany. So as part of this reform process, there were also separate reforms regarding measurement of learning achievements, the latest being introduced earlier this year. It will start with primary school, and then later these new type of reports are also introduced in the Oberschule, not in the Gymnasium. In the Gymnasium, you still get traditional grades from 1 to 6. So until last year, these reports in primary school were given out as a written text. So in a written text where your child was described. You know, he or she is good at sports, likes football, and is good at music. He knows the alphabet from A to Z now, and he's able to read basic text, something like that. Now the teachers tick boxes. And by ticking these boxes, they are supposed to show to the parents the competencies a child has acquired over the school year. So the idea is that over the 4 years of primary school, or later on over 9 years of Oberschule, you can see the progress a child can make from where it started to where it ends. So it's an explicit aim of this new grading system to emphasize competencies in the learning process compared to just measuring knowledge. Now, as a researcher in education policy with a background in international studies, I think this is a fascinating story. It's a fascinating story about international impulses and how they are translated down to the local level Local in this case because it's, Germany is a federative state, so it's the Bundesland which determines how to grade and how to present this grading. So as a researcher, I would love to conduct a project on this. I would love to filter out how this change occurred. My hypothesis, of course, is that the OECD, with its PISA study, not only led to a change in the education system, but also led to a sort of paradigm shift. A paradigm shift of what is measured, what is presented in these reports now. So I would love to interview people involved and to see whether I can really trace this process of how the OECD had an influence on that and how much people are aware of that and how much they took from the international sphere and how this translated down. So this is one side of the story. That's the researcher's side. The other side is the one of a mother. And from this perspective, these new reports are a disaster. It's a disaster because these reports contain almost no information on what the individual child is able to do now, what it can. And I'll show you why, if I understood how this works. Yes. So, you get these kind of ticking boxes reports for mathematics and for German. The idea is that in first grade, the boxes from 1 to 4 apply to your child. In second grade, the boxes from 3 to 6. Third grade from 5 to 8, and then the fourth grade from 7 to 10. So you have all these abstract categories for maths, and now my child is in the second grade, or was in the second grade last year. So the lines from or the boxes from 3 to 6 apply. Just to give you an example, so the teacher ticked a box here. Can someone tell me what this means now? I mean, this is a distinguished group of people, so tell me what I can tell my child, what he can now. Because that was my moment of helplessness when you stood in front of me, gave me this report and said, Mom, tell me, what am I good at? What do I can now? What do I like in mathematics? So.
You're on 5.
Yes. You're on 5. Actually, he was on 5 in everything. I'll tell you what it tells you. Box number 5 complies with the norm standard in second grade. Now, what does this mean? Tell me what he can now. Of course you can't tell me, as I couldn't tell my child, because in order to tell the child what he or she can or knows now, you actually have to download a 20-page brochure. And first of all, you have to find it. You have to find this brochure. You have to know that this sort of way of presenting is now called Kompolei, with a big L in the middle. And then you have to find this 20-page brochure. This 20-page brochure applies to mathematics. There's another 20-page brochure applying to German. So, and then you get all the indicators behind each of these boxes. Oh. How do I get back? Yeah. Haha. So, this is just for 1 to 6, so I could have continued translating that until 10, but I guess you get the message. So what is the teacher supposed to do? The teacher is allowed to tick these indicators once he or she thinks that a child knows about 80% of each of these lines, 80%. And as soon as the child as she ticked more than half of these indicators, she can tick the box. Now, what does my child know now? What is he good at? I still don't know, because I don't know which of these indicators she has ticked, or whether he knows it for 80% or 90 or 95 or 100. So, and as a short footnote, you said if I can sort of make the link to the OECD and make the link to this paradigm shift of measuring competencies. Eckhart, you said it doesn't make any difference in terms of the teaching of a teacher. This makes a difference, because this is about measuring the amount of competencies. So the teacher in a Bremen school now actually has to convert to measuring competencies and teaching these competencies and ticking the boxes for all these competencies. So, and actually if a child is supposed to go to the gymnasium afterwards, it has to reach the box 9 or 10. So that only means the amount of competencies is higher than compared to another child. So it might change teaching. So what is this? What are these boxes? This how is this? These different measures. What do they tell me, or what don't they tell me? I think this new grading system, or the presentation, is rather a presentation, or it's a presentation of disinformation. I know my child is within the norm. Whatever the norm is, it's defined here, but it doesn't really tell me what the single child knows, where he or she should improve, or what he or she likes. So for me, it's rather a presentation of disinformation. But it's called competency. So that reflects to what Sylvia said this morning, measuring competencies. But this measurement doesn't really tell me much. So here's my link now to Patrick's paper. I mean, Patrick showed very clearly it depends on what you do with the data. It depends on how you present the data, and then you can make a message. So here the message is 3/4 of the children in the class of my child had the same sort of grading. They were within the norm. So it always depends on what you want to reach with how you present the data. I have my suspicions about what the state of Bremen and the Education Senate wants to reach with the data of presenting 3/4 of the children in a class with being within the norm. And I think your paper clearly showed there's a lot you can do with the data, depending on your political aims. So Patrick also showed that it's difficult to find decent measurements for giving us the right indication for what equity or learning achievements can be. And I think with that you also presented an additional, very often overlooked challenge faced by statisticians. To put it in methodological or broader terms, you discuss the challenges of operationalizing educational indicators. So if we just recall, you were talking about 17 goals, 126 targets, and 169 indicators for your sustainable development goals. If I had worked this out for mathematics and for German, this is just one line. I had 10 lines for maths, and I have 12 lines for German. I have even more indicators for each of these boxes. So, and I think you also highlighted very convincingly how, depending on the indicator or the means of quantifying, one can come to different, even opposite conclusions regarding progress over time or successful measures for improvement. So, you show how such data is used for ranking and groupings. This is a grouping too. 3/4 of a group of the class are within the norm. And you also show how misinterpretations are possible when reusing the data. So in the paper I had for today, there was also another example of how different states were grouped depending on the indicator you took. So if you want to put it in more broader terms, and I think this also relates to what you said and what you introduced in this morning about, what was it, measure 4 and 5 and 6, so the misuse of data and the methodological terms. I would also say that something we should talk about, which you highlighted in your presentation, is how much gets lost in what I would call the translation or the translation process from a political goal into a concept, from the concept into definition, from definition to measurement, from measurement to indicator, and from indicator to a figure. And that does not even include your mathematical operations showing all the differences. So this line of challenges, this line of translation process from a political goal to a figure, this applies to the measurement of competencies of learning achievements, as in my case, as well as to the measurement of equity or inequality of educational opportunities, as in your case. So we do live in a world of big data, but we should be aware of what this data really is able to tell us, or what it is not able to tell us anymore. I think something lost, but I'm almost done anyway. So we should always be aware that the data is not be collected, data collection should not be an end to itself, but we should always be aware of what we actually want to achieve with the data. So it's not only a question of trusting in data, but achieving something we actually want to show with the data. So, and as a personal note, I'm now the parents' representative in my school. That was, I guess, unavoidable after my bit of research I did. Thank you.